What is happening? It's Mitch here. Welcome back to a brand new video. This week we're going to be talking about adapting Canon lenses to Fuji cameras. So I've got a couple of lens mount adapters here and we're going to do a little bit of a real world test to see how they perform. I'm going to be testing out two adapters today. And both of them are electronic, which means that you can actually have access to the autofocus system of the lens and the Fuji X camera, as well as being able to change the aperture. So this is kind of a new development for Fuji cameras, with them gaining a lot more popularity over the recent years, especially with newer models of Fuji X cameras coming out like the X-H1, the X-T3. They're becoming more and more popular, and there's a lot more demand for these kinds of adapters from people switching from other camera systems. The two adapters that I'll be testing out are the Fringer EF to FX Pro and the Kipon Bavize EF to FX. The main difference between these two adapters is that the Kipon adapter has a glass element inside. I'm not sure if you can see that on the camera. And that's called a focal reducer or speed booster. Now, I won't go into too much detail about how the speed booster or focal reducer actually works. There's plenty of videos on YouTube explaining all of the maths and science around that. But in really simple terms, it takes the image circle of a full frame lens and focuses it down using the glass element onto a smaller sensor like an APS-C sensor. There's plenty of different speed boosters for different lenses and sensors. Basically, this will take, let's say, a 35mm lens. Instead of being a 50mm equivalent field of view, it will actually be a 35mm equivalent field of view, just like it was on a full frame sensor. So essentially you're getting that full frame look back with a smaller sensor. Now the Fringer adapter, on the other hand, actually has an aperture ring on it, so you can change the aperture with this adapter, whereas with the Kipon speed booster version, you need to change the aperture with the camera controls. This is by no means a scientific test as well, so do take everything that I say with a little bit of a grain of salt. If you can, I always recommend to test any gear before you actually go ahead and purchase it, just to make sure that it's right for you. And the lenses that I used were the 35mm 1.4 Sigma Art lens, as well as the 24mm 1.4 Sigma Art. So the reason I use these two lenses is that they're fairly comparable in terms of sharpness and color rendition. And if you put the 24mm on the APS-C camera with the Fringer straight through adapter, the field of view is 35mm equivalent. And if you use the speed booster with the 35mm, of course, we're focusing that light down onto the smaller sensor, which means that we're getting a 35mm equivalent field of view with this lens also. And it's really great to have these two focal lengths because now we can compare the speed booster and the normal adapter to see what kinds of effects that it has on depth of field without changing the focal length or equivalent focal length of the lens. Before we jump into the video, I want to give a quick shout out to Ian for helping me film the BTS on this shoot, as well as Yim, who was our talent for the shoot. I'll link their details in the description below. So my first impression with the Kipon Bavize speed booster was that it had a really hard time acquiring focus with face and eye switched on, even in a really well lit scenario. Around half the shots had completely missed focus. I actually decided to switch off the face and eye detection for the rest of the shoot and just use the AFS mode on the X-T3. So I wanted to do some side-by-side comparisons with the 35mm speed boosted lens, as well as the 24mm with the crop, to compare the depth of field and sharpness. So in this comparison, you can see the difference between the two. The field of view is fairly similar. I think I just did a bad job of keeping the same distance from the subject after switching the lenses over. So the first thing I noticed about the Fringer adapter is that it was really good at acquiring focus, definitely usable for a professional shoot. I actually really enjoyed using this adapter. The Kip-On adapter, on the other hand, was a lot slower than the Fringer adapter and a lot less accurate. I found myself having to be really careful with where I placed the focus point for the image, and I ended up missing focus on a lot of photos. I really hope that they can address this in a firmware update, as I know Fringer, since I bought their adapter, have come out with multiple firmware updates, and every single time the autofocus seems to get better and better. So here's some more comparisons between the two adapters, and you can very clearly see the difference in depth of field between the Speed Booster and the Fringer adapter. The biggest takeaway for me from this test was that the Kip-On adapter was not sharp at all wide open, except for exactly in the middle of the frame. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend getting the Kip-On adapter if you're going to be shooting the lens wide open, which is a bit of a shame because that's kind of the whole point, that you get a Speed Booster adapter so you can retain the field of view as well as the depth of field of a full frame sensor. So if you don't really care about losing sharpness on the edges of your image, or you're just after that full frame look and don't really care about sharpness at all, the Kip-On Speed Booster does have a very unique look with the swirly bokeh and the very shallow depth of field that it can produce, as well as giving you that extra stop of light back as well. So I'm looking forward to testing the adapter a little bit more on different lenses to see if it has a different result, as well as maybe looking forward to some other brands, some other companies bringing out other speed boosters that we can test. I know Metabones does not have one yet, but I would be looking forward to them bringing one out if they decide to. But until then, I'm really happy with the Fringer adapter, and I actually used the Fringer adapter with the 35mm Sigma Art lens. I used it wide open for the rest of the shoot, so I'm going to put up some of those images now so you can see what they look like. Thank you guys for joining me once again for another video. I really appreciate it. If you're new here, I make videos like this every single week talking about photography and filmmaking. So if you want to see more content like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If this video helped you out or if you found it interesting, leave a like down below. Thanks once again, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.